cannot live without these artifacts in EpicSeven. And once again, to save your life, I'll teach you everything you need to know about them so you end up like this next season. First off, this may hands down be one of the most important artifacts to ever grace your account. That's right, it's Aureus. This artifact is not only good for PvP, it's also great for PvE content as well. Now, if you're for some reason wondering who can use this artifact, the answer is pretty much everyone if you're creative. Last Rider Crow, Adventurer Roz, Ambitious Tywin, Yulha, Fallen Cecilia. The list goes on, but the idea of sharing damage that would otherwise beat up your whole team, yeah, this one's kind of a wrap. If you really want to get crazy with it, you can also run this artifact on some unusual characters like Valiant or Karina, but ultimately the value is unbeatable and nothing else compares. Okay, moving along, let me be direct. There are plenty of artifacts that you can run on knights in general, but there are really only two that will make you explode in anger or allow you to laugh gleefully as everyone else around you is having a terrible time. The first is Aureus because you don't do any damage, and second is Elbrus. The ability to randomly counter someone as long as you're a knight feels kind of unfun when you're on the receiving end of it, and honestly, let's be real, the artifact has arguably caused more anger than any other artifact in the game, but we all know how this artifact works. It allows you to use a basic skill whenever one of your allies gets hit. And, fun fact, it also entitles you to one free replacement phone when you inevitably throw your phone out the window. Well, similar to Aureus, every knight can use this artifact if you want to be mean. But ultimately, a few knights come to mind when it comes to being best in slot. The first is the most obnoxious character in this half of 2023. It's Navy Captain Landy. And the second is the reason I close my eyes and pray they never open. Yes, it's Bellion. Now, these are the most prevalent, but like I said, characters like Armin or Ambitious Tywin, these characters can also surprise or ruin your day. A counter stun from Armin, a surprise provoke with Ambitious Tywin, or a classic turn 1 Elbrus into salvo proc from Emma Landy pretty much just ruins your day. Moving along to Rangers, there's really no easy way to phrase this, but if you could imagine, there's only really one artifact you could crown king of EpicSeven, and you guessed it, it's the scepter thing that unfortunately pisses me off every single day. Now let's be clear, if Bellion is what puts me to bed, Guiding Light is what motivates me to wake up in the morning. This artifact has saved me from endless disgusting characters of the past and the present, like Assassin Sid or Zio. There are plenty of characters who live and die by this artifact. Let's just get into it. Faith, Aslitica, Lua, Lua 2.0, and Briar Witch Iceria all really top the chart for the most commonly picked characters with Guiding Light, and it's pretty clear why they want it. None of these characters possess cleanses or a way to deal with debuffs, so even if Briar Witch Iceria has a way to prevent lethal damage, she probably won't do anything if she's already debuffed. That being said, a lot of these Rangers end up being some of the most creative or insane characters, assuming you get to take a turn. This character gets to reset your whole team. This character pushes and resets someone by their whole cooldown. And this character removes buffs and applies defense break at the same time, while also removing the ability to revive. Also has a innate hit chance, has immortality when dropping below lethal, has a defense break on S1 out of. In other words, any Ranger can use this artifact. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. Seriously? This artifact? I can't live without this one? Okay, just level with me up. Rangers really only have one artifact that we've kind of mentioned that they really want, which is Guiding Light. And the only other artifact that you'd kind of be upset if you didn't have as a Ranger player, yeah, it's this one. This is a bit of a spoiler for the next section, but seriously, Summertime Iceria and Pirate Captain Flan are two completely different characters when you have this artifact on. The ability to land a bomb with your basic attack is simply too strong considering the damage and utility that bombs have. Pair an attack buff for an extra turn with this artifact, and suddenly you're kind of annoyed that they're even in the game. Now, if it weren't clear from the last section, there are really only two characters that make the most out of this artifact. And that, of course, is Pirate Captain Flan and Summertime Iceria. Now, I just want to hammer in just how dysfunctional these characters would be without this artifact. So just imagine waiting 2 turns for an RNG random target placing bomb, or 4 turns for a bomb and burn with nothing else to do in between those turns. Yeah, they're kind of whack without this artifact. I'm positive that I've worn out everyone's ears from spreading the good news of Wind Rider, but seriously, this artifact is not only a pseudo-limited, which means it has no character banner, it also makes your character feel like a limited 2. That pesky Sid that you can't hit because it activated Wind Rider, that Kisei who can continue to stay stealth after her S3 wears off, yeah, that's all thanks to the damage and stealth that Wind Rider provides. Something that I've seen debates about is whether Portrait or Wind Rider does more damage when it comes to thieves, but something that I want to bring up is that the damage difference between a Portrait and a Wind Rider without a kill is pretty minute. And of course, that's not taking into consideration the insane damage that it gives later, or the fact that you are literally untargetable if you eliminate an enemy. Long story short, it's an insane damage and survivability artifact all in one, and it's not to be underestimated. There are a few characters who can use Wind Rider, and while you can definitely argue that other evasion-based characters definitely don't want to use Wind Rider, like Closer Charles, the characters who do make use of this artifact kind of make it look broken. Being able to hit Sid after he uses his skill 3 is way different than him continuously going into stealth and leaving your Apocalypse Ravi really mad. Mildred being able to clean up a team and not get one tapped by Aiden is also really frustrating. In closing, this artifact buffs the hell out of the characters that actually make use of it. And so not only do they become self-sufficient, they also gain bonus damage. Okay, so while evasion is kind of a joke right now, it is no laughing matter when I say that Shepherd of the Hollow is seriously one of the most game-changing artifacts for Thief. Now, some of you guys will make fun of Remnant Violet when he gets hit, but in order for him to even begin soloing or doing Remnant Violet things, you kind of need the damage. 24% damage, when you think about it, is the equivalent to not leveling the last 2 or maybe 3 molas in a skill. So that Remnant Violet S3 that could have done 20,000 damage instead of 18,000, yeah, that's the difference here. And when you start to add up all the damage and the innate evasion that it gives, it simply is the most consistent damage increase that doesn't rely on something like a jank counter or a whack extra turn that you get given. Now, I know I did kind of sell this artifact as being primarily good on Remnant Violet, but you can also use it on characters like Closer Charles or Aiden. And while normally I would agree that an artifact being good on a few characters doesn't really justify calling it insane, I see Aiden and this Remnant Violet character like all the time. So if you're gonna see it this often, surely the artifact has some pretty good value. As a side note, Aiden and Remnant Violet are already really prone to getting hit when they're on my side, so I might as well take advantage of the lost health that I have and do more damage with it. If there was an argument for the most sought after artifact that you could actually pull from a banner right now, it would be this one. Everyone and their mother kind of slept on Golden Rose initially, but now everyone is scrounging for it like their life depends on it. And in classic Smilegate fashion, it was not available in the Anniversary Selector. This artifact pretty much speaks for itself, but in case you didn't know, Golden Rose provides lifesteal when you're below 50% health, and a damage increase when you're above 50% health. This might not seem like the most game-changing set of features ever, but if you consider how important or how many characters use Sigurd Scythe on warriors, and then you consider that you don't really have to focus on this useless attack stat in order to use the artifact, okay, this thing's pretty crazy. Now, warriors of all kind can definitely argue in favor of needing lifesteal in general, but to be able to gain that and damage is a lethal combo. So characters like Edward Elric, Lionheart Sirmia, ML Ken, all gain insane value from this artifact being equipped. And now, while most of them usually like the lifesteal or would definitely at least want the lifesteal in general, being able to deal extra damage when you're above 50% is kind of insane. And of course, that isn't even taking into consideration being low and clutching out matches just by healing up all the extra damage that you take. Side note, as I mentioned before, this artifact isn't limited, so if you're gonna compare it to Sigurd Scythe, or even if you just get lucky, you can get this artifact maxed. Okay, now this is where things get kind of tough and awkward. I know this isn't supposed to be a free-to-play list or anything like that, but it does feel weird to say that 3 of the best artifacts currently on the list at this time are all limited. But if we can move past the fact that it's limited, this artifact is pretty crazy. It gives free immunity at the start of battle. It gives a free attack buff that pops up over your head so long as you aren't debuffed at the start of your turn. And since you compare it with characters like Strays or ML Kawazu at the start of their turn, this is pretty crazy. Now again, this is the perfect transition to talk about who it's actually best in slot on and why. And the first is the Planet Splitter himself, Strays, who crazily enough just needs an attack buff to be usable at pretty much any stat line. Normally people prioritize getting around 4,000 attack to guaranteed one-shot tanks, but this handy-dandy attack buff lets you focus on other stats, reduce the attack, and I don't know, maybe give yourself more speed. But even if speed is less your game, look no further than Inferno Kawazu, who just got his detonation buff increase, and also this attack buff just overkills. Okay, well, I guess it's no surprise that we're talking about this next artifact since we are talking about all the best artifacts in EpicSeven. But yeah, this one's on it. Access to a Soulburn turn 1 is not underrated. Everyone knows how OP that is. But regardless of how strong the Soulburns are, the artifact itself is just super crazy since it's a 4-star artifact that is available to any mage. These two factors alone already make them pretty comparable to artifacts like Aureus, Adamant Shield, Sasha Thanes, etc, etc. But then you actually consider how impactful certain soulburns are in the game, like Ran or Faithless Litica, Briarwitch Iceria, and then you just think to yourself, okay, it's a no-brainer, this one's really OP. Now, I did mention previously that any knight could wear Elbrus or Aureus if you were just trying to be creative, but there was a bit of a caveat. The caveat is that some knights don't actually have enough health to sustain being hit. Some knights actually have bad counter synergy with Elbrus. But fortunately or unfortunately for the mage category, that's never been the case with Book. Spectre, Tenebria, Zeo, Politis, Arya, Ida, all of these characters can hold Book and usually don't get punished for it. And I just want to point out that the only thing that's scarier than a mage with the Book is the thing that it's trying to soul burn off of. These characters can strip while disregarding effect resistance as a stat. This one can get extra turns. Now, obviously none of this sounds very balanced, but I'm sure all of you guys understand just how good Book is. Okay, and finally, don't call me a broken record, but this next one might really change your life. Now, to be clear, this artifact is limited and also collab locked, but what it does for the average Soul Weaver is only rivaled by what something like Aureus or Book does for their respective classes. A once per turn heal that can restore 20% of your max health, and you get 15 free effect resistance. The heals can stack and aren't limited to one effect per team. Nonsense aside, Soul Weavers that aren't too dedicated to a specific niche or a cheese can definitely make use of this artifact. Ocean Breeze Luluka definitely feels unfair to play against when you have Ice Cream buff and then Guardian Ice Crystal and then someone gets healed back to full. You have Destina constantly healing, cleansing, and sometimes even preventing a high priority target from dying. All of these are great candidates for Guardian Ice Crystal simply because 15% effect resistance and a 20% heal is too insane not to consider. Now, the newest artifact on this list also happens to be one of the most frustrating to play against as well. Now, most Soul Weavers benefit from having Ice Guardians heal, but on occasion there are times when a cheese or niche build can actually be really successful. And what I'm referring to here is Soul Constellation taking the best of both worlds, giving you a whopping 40% effect resistance. Let's get to see who uses it. Now, the obvious answer here is to just assume that Ocean Breeze Luluka's best in slot artifact is this. However, after seeing how impactful Guardian Ice Crystal was with Ocean Breeze Luluka, it's kind of clear that this artifact takes the backseat to the other. That being said, it is undeniable that free effect resistance is helpful when it comes to Ocean Breeze Luluka's playstyle. A character like Moon Bunny, however, makes alternative great use of this artifact when paired together because of her combat readiness built into her kit. The ability to push ahead of other enemies on the combat readiness bar with this artifact is extremely helpful with Moon Bunny's playstyle. Okay, so I know this is kind of cheating, but to ignore any of these other categories I've placed a few of the artifacts in would be pretty irresponsible. Now, as you can see here, I didn't include any of these since they aren't tied to a specific class, but nonetheless, they are still really good. Symbol of Unity for characters like Zahak, Warhorn for certain characters like Mediator Cowrick, Proof of Valor on literally any character that you want. Artifacts like these are insane value, but don't quite top the list for best of any specific class. Another huge factor as to why they're so important is because there's no gacha required if you want to get these artifacts. Now, that isn't to say that they don't cost anything, but the cost of a side story or any of these Guild War artifacts is pretty laughable. That being said, while they're all still really good, this is kind of just the honorable mention section, so it is what it is. Now, if you've been playing EpicSeven at all, you know that this list currently doesn't really include the artifacts you're likely to use on your day-to-day. Daydream Joker is one of the best damage artifacts for hunts because it gives so much health scaling damage. Bloodstone is great when a ranger needs to sustain the rest of the team. The list goes on and on, but to summarize quickly, many if not all of these artifacts kind of pose great value in certain PvE situations. Now, whether it be for healing, turn cycling, reducing the cooldown of skills, or even making you do more damage, these artifacts have varying levels of importance, but they are definitely worth keeping an eye out for. While the past few mentions of artifacts were mostly related to special ones or PvE or a special case, this next list is the actual honorable mentions list. Fairy Tail's artifact is insane on characters like Solitaria and Archdemon, Sigurd Scythe on characters like Edward Elric, the newly buffed martial artist Ken, and even Holy Sec are all really crazy, assuming you know what you're looking for. That being said, many of these artifacts you can live without, but really allow for a different kind of playstyle or more freedom once you have them. Okay, but once you have everything that I mentioned above, then you can start worrying on artifacts like this. That's gonna be it for this video though, guys. I apologize for semi-lying and bending the truth. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like, comment, turn the notification bell. Let me know if I missed anything, if you agree with this list, if you don't, and subscribe. Anyways, guys, make sure to check out all my platforms: TikTok, Discord, Twitch, YouTube, home, and all that jazz. I'll see you on the next one. Adios.